In this project, we tried to interrogate the spatiotemporal neural dynamics of perceptual decision making, and in particular in a multisensory environment. In order to do that, we recruited 22 adult participants who were tasked with categorizing noisy, auditory, and visual stimuli of faces and cars. These were the unisensory modalities, and also audiovisual stimuli of faces and cars, while also undergoing a simultaneous 64-channel EEG recording. Furthermore, to probe effects of learning, the experiment was conducted over the span of 3 days. We employed a machine learning approach in order to identify the constituent neural signatures of perceptual learning, and more specifically, a single trial multivariate linear discriminant analysis algorithm was applied to the EEG data in order to extract temporally distinct neural components of learning. We also tried to depart from the conventional methodologies that just compare the neural responses, distinguishing between the stimuli, so between faces and cars. What we did was a more direct approach, so we employed LDA to directly discern a learning-related signal between the first and the last day of experimentation. In order to do that, we configured the dataset to be inputted into the algorithm in a novel way. So the data from all participants were aggregated into a single dataset that was then used as input to the algorithm. This approach successfully attenuated the inter-participant differences and yields a really informative output. So indeed, we identified modality-specific neural signatures of learning, so you can appreciate in the visual and the auditory modalities the presence of a peak at around 250 to 300 milliseconds post-stimulus onset, localized in the occipital areas of the brain, while the multisensory stimuli are characterized by a totally different, totally distinct spatiotemporal pattern. So they have an early peak at around 150 milliseconds with occipital localization, which swiftly shifts to the more frontal and frontoparietal regions, and a later peak at around 400 milliseconds that's linked to post-sensory processing. So the fact that this topographical distribution shifts from occipital to frontoparietal regions was also investigated through other techniques, and we found that multisensory learning engages firstly lower order sensory areas before recruiting higher order decision related networks for integration. In order to identify this procedure, we used a novel methodology employing Taylor series. And we used those algorithms to examine how the audiovisual peaks can predict the unisensory peaks, and we found that the first audiovisual peak predicted the early unisensory peak. So this is something related to sensory encoding, while the late audiovisual peak didn't have a correlate with the unisensory peak. So we identified a distinct audiovisual neural signature that is related to post-sensory decision processing. And we further corroborated those results using a reliable component analysis algorithm, which captures what is shared across trials of the same condition. And you can appreciate here that the difference in EEG amplitudes between day 3 and day 1 for the unisensory in blue and the multisensory modalities in red, we can optimally discriminate between the two conditions at exactly the same time windows that we had identified before using LDA. Then we employed a reinforcement learning-based rediffusion modeling approach, which basically captures and extracts some cognitive parameters of learning, namely the learning rate for each day, and we found that both the RCA neural signatures per modality and the LDA neural signatures per modality can predict the learning rate at the last day of experimentation, or the difference in learning rate across days. Also, to further characterize these neural dynamics, we employed information theoretic metrics, including transfer entropy, which captured a modality-dependent flux of information across brain loci throughout learning, while also employing phase amplitude coupling to examine how the cross-frequency interactions adapted throughout the learning regimen. And you can appreciate that here. So this is the difference in cross-frequency interaction across days, so day 3 minus day 1, for the visual and the audiovisual modalities. And you can appreciate that these predicted the accuracy gains from day 1 and day 3. Also, we used a neurally informed HDDM hierarchical diffusion model using EEG discriminator amplitudes from LDA from all 3 modalities, so how far day 1 is from day 3 per trial. We use them as drift rate regressors in the HDDM model. So that revealed that the detected EEG components increase the drift rate, so increase the rate of evidence accumulation across days. We also did a condition-dependent analysis based on different stimuli, phases and cars, all different levels of difficulty, as you can appreciate here, using LDA, and we found a consistent learning effect with identical scalp map topographies as the unisensory modalities in both the stimulus-dependent analysis and the coherence-dependent analysis. So that pervasive presence of a robust learning effect across different conditions necessitated a further investigation to establish its universality. And indeed, when we do not control for any task-related parameter, we identify a stimulus and modality-agnostic learning signal that demonstrate a generalized and supramodal enhancement in decision-making across a learning regimen. We also tried to characterize the learning dynamics in the frequency domain. So we employed a time frequency analysis using MOLAD wavelets for the alpha brain waves across time, and we contrasted the alpha power for day 1 and day 3. And what we found is a modality agnostic gradually rising learning signal that can be subdivided into 2 different clusters based on different participant dynamics. And what we can appreciate is that the corresponding scalp maps and the heat map we can see here suggest a central scalp topography with the highest peaks in activity occurring at 100 and 200 milliseconds. So these have to do with sensory encoding and perhaps attention modulation. And indeed, we found that the alpha brain waves, which modulate attention span for the participants, are different and statistically different across days. And if we use a neurally constrained HGDM using the alpha power as linear regressors for drift rate, we can appreciate that indeed day-by-day alpha power modulations were predictive of drift rate increases with learning. So overall, using this study, we tried to reveal the spatio-temporal dynamics of multisensory learning, and we identified a common supramodal EEG component of perceptual learning in unisensory trials, and a unique bimodal temporal profile of perceptual learning in multisensory trials.